Welcome to the Learning Can't Wait podcast, a Full Mind production. At Full Mind, our vision is to ensure every child has access to an exceptional education. Each episode, we will be joined by pathfinders within and around the education space who are bringing about transformational change on behalf of deserving students. I am your host, Haley Spierbauer. Welcome back, everybody, to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. I am thrilled to introduce our next guest, Dr. Kiesha King, Head of U.S. Education Strategy at T-Mobile. Dr. King, welcome.
Hey, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm great, especially because you and I have had a journey getting to this recording date, but we are here, we are present, and I know we're both excited.
I know we made it. We made it. It's like a late plane. You're just so excited to get off and get the party started.
I hear you. I think we should just go ahead and get that party started. How about you?
Let's go.
So, can you answer my first question, please? How did you come to be the personal and professional version of yourself?
For as long as I can remember, I've had this passion for education and technology. Like education at its core, I have always loved kiddos. And when I moved to Houston from Phoenix, I started working in criminal justice, which was like the furthest thing from what I thought I would be doing. And I kept thinking, I had this thing in the back of my head that said, you always love working with kids. What There has to be a future of you working with kids in some way, shape, or form. And then I started looking into different programs and I said, you know what? I think I want to be a teacher. Like, I think that's the thing for me. So here I am, this 20-year-old, recently graduated from Arizona State University and trying to figure out what the next move is going to be. And I decided to go and start teaching. And it was the absolute best decision I've ever made in my life. I immediately, I want to say my first year, reached out to Sony and said, "Hey, is there anything you're doing that I can add to my classroom? My kids are always playing PlayStation. There has to be something you're doing." Because I wanted to tap into what the kids were constantly like focused on. And they actually sent me 20 PlayStation 1s with digital literacy content on them that they were pre-launching, and I was able to do flexible learning with those PlayStation 1s in my classroom. It was
Wow.
unbelievable. It was unbelievable. And I had a mix so that we were doing inclusive classroom spaces. So I had everything from my special education babies to my accelerated babies to my GT babies to my regular on grade level babies. And all of them were all kind of mixed into these different classroom settings. And those PlayStation 1s really allowed me to do flexible grouping in a way that resonated with those kiddos. And they were excited to show up every day.
You know, there's an attendance crisis right now
Yes.
across the United States.
Yeah.
And when you tell a story like that, it's so illustrative of how
Yeah.
understanding kids, their wants, their needs, and their desires can really bring them to school every single day.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think there's another side of that for teachers, right? As you start exploring your curiosities with technology with your kiddos and you get over that fear and you just start tapping into different resources, it really allows you to expand how you're teaching. And what is the teaching and learning process? How do we think about engaging our kiddos? How do we think about inspiring motivation for them? How do we think about bridging the gap with parental engagement? All of those things happen when you kind of overcome that fear and you start teaching kids from a space that says, I want to learn too. Like, I'm learning right beside you, we're figuring this out together, because I want you to be prepared to go into spaces that maybe I had never been in.
Mm, how real is that? I'm curious because you, in the roles you served and the roles you continue to serve, have the opportunity to see hundreds of classrooms a year, and you
Yeah.
get to see great teaching in action. What is the translated Dr. King in her first year of teacher reaching out to Sony? What are some stories of real excellence in serving kids where they are that you've observed in your travels?
Oh man, we've been so many places, and I've worked with thousands of school district leaders at this point. I think when you initially bring resources to kiddos that have not had the access to the resources, just the lighting up of their face the curiosity of what they're going to be able to do with those devices is like gas in the gas tank. It is so inspiring and motivating to be able to sit with those kiddos and start to explore the possibilities. And usually they tell you, "Oh, well, we can do this. Have you thought about that?" Right? Like I remember there's this recording with Sir Ken Robinson where he was talking through and he says, there was a time when you had to like light a fire to have light in a room. Then there's a time when there's a light bulb, ooh, and you screw it in and now you have light. He says, now you walk in the room and there's light. And he says, there's so much that's happening where we're planning for the technology, right? And kiddos are walking in and the technology's already there and their light bulb's already on. And they're waiting for us to just give them that guidance and the freedom to be able to use the light and use the technology. And so my biggest takeaway from that, and I absolutely loved Sir Ken Robinson. I don't know how familiar you are with his work on creativity for kiddos, but my takeaway from that is just to continue to inspire students to have that creativity and to have the innovation that's required for them to go into this future workforce that doesn't exist with the confidence that they need. And it's so much easier to do that as a teacher when you can get over your own fears.
I love that. I remember later in my career, my school-based career, someone said to me, if your kids love Roblox, you better learn Roblox. Like it's just you really have to think about, and to your point about Sir Ken Robinson, you really have to think about what does a creative school look like? What does it look like if you expand past the traditional what we expect school to be in order to redesign our thinking and our classrooms to really reach kids.
I totally agree with that. And I think that creativity is just necessary to inspire them. At this point, kids aren't they're not as interested in all the assessments and just the kind of monotony of okay, here's our routine for every day. I think those things are important to teach them, but I think it's also important to make sure that they are creators and facilitators of what's around them. And we've
You're,
heard that for forever, project-based learning and all these other things that inspire kiddos to really take part in the creation of their surroundings.
you're hitting on my next question, which is exactly about student agency. You've advocated for children's voice to be really central to teaching and learning. Can you say more about what that means to you? How can leaders and teachers center student perspectives in the work that they're doing?
You know, student perspective, hold on. Sorry, run that back for a second. I just want to make sure I hit on key points. Would you mind asking that question again?
Not a problem. Yeah. You've touched on a topic that I know you're passionate about, which is agency within kids in the classroom. And you've been a strong advocate for children's voices. How do you think teachers and leaders can center student perspectives in the work they do within schools?
I think student perspectives have to come through authentically, right? It's always going to be through things that kids absolutely love and things that really keep them engaged. And the only way that they can figure out what they love and what keeps them engaged is if we actually give them access to new ideas and new concepts. And so I think so often, we have these rigid expectations of how teaching and learning should look, right? Kids walk in a classroom, they have this set curriculum, this is what it should look like. What happens if we build the curriculum in summer and then suddenly there's a new technology or something new that they need to learn when they get 2 months into the school year, right? What if there's a new policy or some update that really impacts their lives, right? What happens to the flexibility in teaching where we can really allow students to step up and have that agency and have the voice around things that are currently happening in their own atmosphere that impact their futures the most. And I think that's what inspires kiddos to really want to have the agency and want to have those conversations. If it's not interesting, if it's not impactful for them, if it doesn't expand their current atmosphere, it's so easy for them to get disengaged, right? And this is such a unique opportunity now where we're saying, hey, teachers were thrown into this situation throughout the pandemic where, there was no framework, right? What always has been a data driven organization and a data driven institution shifted us to something that everyone was flying by the seat of their pants. Whether you were sitting in a classroom or you're sitting in a company trying to support a classroom, we were all flying by the seat of our pants. And so now we have to take those opportunities, take those reflections, right? And really see the amount of freedom that our students have developed as a result of not being in that seat for even a short amount of time, for not having the structure that they had for even a short amount of time. There is an element of that freedom that those kids really miss at this point, right? And so I think that it would behoove us to just create some systems that allow them to embrace the new technologies, to embrace, some of the new innovations, to explore their own ideas and mind frame, and to have a little bit of freedom around how we think about the teaching and learning process.
You mentioned the pandemic, and I know that as you said, schools were really impacted, but so were the organizations that surround schools. And one topic that has really become clearly important due to some policy changes that are pending, as well as due to the highways and roads we had to lay down that didn't exist previously during the pandemic, is the topic of E-rate and the current connectivity crisis that many would say is pending. Talk to me a little bit about how you're thinking about this connectivity issue and what we can be doing as corporations and companies and nonprofits to handle whatever challenges are pending.
Yeah, well, we had the sunsetting of the emergency connectivity program. We had the sunsetting of the affordable connectivity program. We had all the ARPA funds and all the other resources that were there to support the digital divide, sunsetted. And so now these communities are saying, "Oh, this is just one more program that came and left." Right? There's no replacement, there's no alternative. And so we see that states and school districts and counties and, all these folks are scrambling to figure this out. And students deserve, right, our attention to the matter. So when it comes to E-rate, and, my opinion on E-rate is that if the program is restricted to not include connectivity directly to students, then I think as corporations, as nonprofits, as entities that serve students, we have a responsibility to still step up and make sure that we're functioning in the best interest of providing the connectivity needed for those kiddos. And I think that's why I'm so excited that Project 10 Million will continue, particularly on the direct to parent side of the house, right? T-Mobile has just made this beautiful commitment to do great things. And I'm excited to see those great things still help kiddos.
Okay, so let's dive in. Tell us about Project 10 Million. You're obviously thrilled
Okay.
about it. If you're living under a rock,
Yeah,
this is T-Mobile's
you have to
enormous
be.
initiative.
I
Tell us
know.
all about it. I know that folks who don't know about this are going to be really excited, like I was when I first learned about it.
Yeah, well, T-Mobile has connected over 6 million kiddos, over the years. I mean, I think when I initially got here, we maybe had 20,000 kids connected. And we started building up these programs and essential services to support the ecosystem of education. Project 10 Million is a part of that ecosystem. It's saying, right, like T-Mobile has this commitment to solve the digital divide. And what does that look like? It's a $10.7 billion commitment, right? Like I just have to pause there when I
That's a
say it, but
huge number.
it's so big. It's
Yes.
so big. And we're in the fifth year of that commitment. And really, the commitment says for every eligible student household, T-Mobile will provide a no-cost hotspot and 5 years of internet access, either 100 gig or 200 gig, based on eligibility, directly to those students or through school districts. It has been such a beautiful opportunity to build a program that's one of a kind that support kids all over the country. Over 6 million kids connected. Like I still cannot wrap my head around
Yeah.
the impact of that all over this country. And it's not something that stops, right? It is, you got to think about it. If a student is a senior in high school and they are able to take advantage of Project 10 Million, think about what that does for post-secondary
Right.
education, right? Like just having the access. If there's a student, even if there's a kid that potentially has access, through their school or in some other way, and now they're on the side of the soccer field, or they're waiting for mom to get off work, or they're in the car on a long road trip, right? Or they're at grandma and grandpa's because after school, it's three different kids that have to go to three different places. Now they
Mm-hmm.
have the connectivity to sustain their work, and also, fulfill their curiosities some. I think, it goes beyond being able to support academics and into kind of some of the other academic pieces that say, oh, my bike is broken. I want that can teach me that. That's beyond what's being taught in the classroom, and it's just fulfilling a student's curiosity. The internet access is just so critical to that.
It goes back to your earlier comment, just really about creativity in the schools and
Yeah.
helping students to get re-engaged through passions and interests rather than just content. But it also speaks to this question about ethical tech and equity within technology and ed tech, the space in particular. This is a topic you've spoken much about, that you have been really a leader in driving forward in our space.
Thank you.
Can you talk to the audience a bit and to me about how we ensure, beyond just the roads and rails, as I call our underpinnings of connectivity in and
Yeah.
around schools, how we could really be thinking about equity and ethics in ed tech at this moment in time when so much is being challenged?
And so much is changing, right? I
Hmm.
mean, it's just constantly changing. There's new
Right.
systems and programs coming out every day. Companies are trying to figure out which direction to go. One day, one is saying, oh, we're full force AI. And then you read an article, and another one is saying, oh, we're focused on the human element and we're actually removing some elements of AI. And so it's like, which direction do we go? How do we prepare our kiddos for the future workforce that doesn't exist? And I can't say that enough. And I think we're still trying to figure that out, but there has to be an element of standardization, to make sure that kiddos are really safe when they're online, and they're safe while they're exploring these new technologies, and their privacy is protected, and their parents have some visibility into what they're doing and what they're working on. I do think those elements are critically important. So it's beyond just the curiosity and saying, oh, we want students to have access, we want them to have exposure, they have to be using artificial intelligence and virtual reality and all these different new innovations to allow them to have immersive learning opportunities. It's bigger than just that, right? It now goes into the standardization, which we know and love so much in the education space. And some folks say, well, standardization got us like assessments. And we don't know if we like those or not. But I do think there are elements of standardization, like what Alex is doing with AI EDU, right? It is absolutely phenomenal in creating the structured content and creating these pathways for learning. And you see that happening even with, other companies that are creating these strategic pathways for learning and integrative solutions that allow, personalization to look different and students to be able to create their own journey, and that journey is responsive to them, right? There are ways to interact with the technology, but then there's also this need to be responsible, right? How do we make sure that we're doing our best to eliminate bias? How do we make sure we're doing our best to be inclusive with the technology and make sure that it's representing all of the students that it's hoping to serve? How do we make sure that, if I'm in a really small rural town somewhere, right, I'm not the kiddo that's saying, well, what is artificial intelligence? I never had an opportunity to see that because maybe my teacher never had an opportunity to see it, right? Or maybe there's just a discomfort overall in the rural area because there's not an opportunity to see the impact on things that actually relate, right? What's the impact of artificial intelligence on agriculture? What's the impact of artificial intelligence and immersive learning on, construction and building, all these different resources and things that are critically important in rural America, right? I think there's an opportunity for us to open our minds to that, Haley, and that's what I'm so excited about, with this conversation and so many others. Like the ethics are important, but also the inclusivity around how do we bring these things to market so that they can speak to anyone.
When I talk to early stage ed tech companies,
Yeah.
I think that what you're saying is the message I try to convey, that like as you build your product, you have to think about who am I impacting and how, and who am I leaving out of the conversation,
Yeah.
right? Like if you're not thinking about that as you build your tool, if you're not thinking about that in a school as you decide what products to purchase or implement or how you're going to implement it, you're really missing the mark.
Totally
You're
agree.
really missing the mark.
Yeah.
You have to be thinking about that at the beginning,
Yeah.
not in the middle or at the end. It's good if you're at least getting to that place at some point, but really the time to be considering and asking questions is at the very beginning
Yeah.
so that you can build with all learners in mind.
Yes. And because the technology is changing so quickly, you have to build with flexibility in mind.
Oh, yes.
Right? And that's not something we've been doing forever and ever.
Hmm.
We've been able to set it and forget it, for the school year or for the semester.
Right.
Now, you build that technology or that curriculum and, your instructional processes in summer. And by the time you get to fall, there's new technologies and new things
Mhm.
that kiddos want to be able to explore and they need to be able to explore. So, how
Right.
do we start to address those things without feeling too overwhelmed? Right? We have to be really intentional about creating the structures, providing the professional development, making sure that teachers are able to overcome some of those fears in safe spaces, creating the strategic kind of process and planning that's there, engaging our parents, making sure that they're a part of the conversation. I think it's just such a big opportunity for us to now start coming together with these cohesive conversations that are ongoing. It's not just, oh, we're going to have a council in summer and we're going to figure these things out and we're going to bring in the city and the county and all these different stakeholders to solve things. No, it is an ongoing conversation that helps to shape ongoing strategy around how we build the brightest and best future for our learners.
Beautifully said, Dr. King. Beautifully, beautifully said.
Thank you.
You've shared a little bit about what has you excited, but I'm curious if you think to the future of education and this evolving world that has jobs that don't even exist for our kiddos yet, what gets you the most excited? Like, what has you waking up and jumping out of bed every morning?
The new solutions. I think there are so many new solutions that are embracing the new technologies to create a safer, um, more structured today for our kiddos, right? When you think about even from safety and security to communication solutions in schools to and with parents to transportation solutions to everything from athletics to how technology gets their fleet around campuses to support making sure students aren't losing instructional time. Like the list goes on. I think for me, I am probably most excited right now about the creation of all these different solutions that allow administrators and leaders to really make thoughtful decisions to future proof some of the work that they're doing. And it's hard to say future proof without regretting it because I feel like it's being built every day. Like, you're future proofing, but at the same time, the minute you implement all of your 5G stuff, there's like another technology that says, oh, actually, you need to do that thing.
Mm,
But I think we have a responsibility to hear all the voices. I know that's one thing I did when I was an administrator in a school district. There was never a vendor that I didn't want to talk to. There was never a voice I didn't want to hear. There was never a new technology I didn't want to know about because I wanted to make the absolute best decision for
mm.
all of the stakeholders that I was responsible for.
Yeah, it's overwhelming when you look at Learn Platform's annual report
Yeah.
on the number of ed tech tools that schools adopt every year and teachers adopt every year. It is really overwhelming. I remember being an administrator and having to say no to that conversation, but I also remember being a teacher and loving every new tool I got to try.
Yeah, you
I mean,
want to bring them all in.
I
And they're
literally was
like,
an
wait.
early adopter of Brain Pop, and I can tell the story of meeting like Karina before everything got really big and
Yes.
being in my school in my classroom and people just gasp at that story. I mean, it ages me a bit, but
Yeah.
as a teacher, it was so exciting.
Oh yeah, I think we all can probably think back to the first time we interacted with Brain Pop. Brain Pop, it was pretty cool,
It
right? Like
still is pretty cool.
and
I
you're
got
like,
to meet Moby the other day, and it was
yeah,
like
you're like,
a
wait, you
highlight.
cover all content areas and all grade levels,
I
and
know, I
like you're
know,
still building and you're
I know,
responsive to what I have to say. That's
I know.
unheard of. I mean, Brain Pop has been it probably was the core of some of the reason why I went into education software programs and
Oh
wanting to
my gosh, really? Because that's true for me too.
absolutely. I mean, I remember doing my first RFP for our learning management system, and I was like, why can't BrainPop be like a contender for all the things that I need?
Oh
I
my
just felt
gosh,
like I wanted them to fit into every
I
category, to check
know.
every box. And it's just a company that I've just grown to love over the years.
Yes,
I
yes.
don't think they know that. I don't think I've ever said that in a
Well,
recording.
I know for a fact we have some brain pop folk that listen to this podcast. So, hello
BrainPop
to
is
all listening.
amazing. It's amazing.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Listen, I could think of just a couple moments in my career where tools like Brain Pop and other ed tech
Yeah,
tools really transformed my excitement about content, but
yeah,
also my students' engagement. And that's the question that we're really like circling around here today is like, how do you make sure that every kid gets exactly what they need and deserve in a manner that is enriching and engaging and exciting, that
yeah.
brings joyful learning to every classroom?
Yeah. I think that's a perfect question, and we cannot do it without collaboration. We
Mhm.
can't do it without private-public partnership. We can't do it without thought leadership and thought sponsorship. We
Mm,
can't do it without this type of platform that goes in and says, you know what, I want to take some of the best and brightest leaders, and I want to bring them just to have a conversation around what they're thinking, what's
mm,
happening, what are the things they're seeing, who are the people they're talking to. What are
right.
some of the problems and dilemmas that they're hoping to solve? And then how do we collectively bring it together? I would love to see all your podcast guests in one place one
Oh
day
my
with
God.
you just
Dream. A
driving
dream.
conversation, right? That would be a dream come true because you have brought on some of the smartest people I've ever met have been
Yeah,
on your show.
thank
And I
you.
think it's a testament to how important this conversation is and how much kids and teachers and just the industry of education is depending on us to get this right at this
Mhm.
pivotal time. And I want to be a part of that. And you're a part of that.
Yeah, no, that's really kind of you to say. It is so heartening to me because recording this podcast allows me selfishly to meet some of the most brilliant minds, like you said, and amplify their work and their stories. And I learned so much, so much. I've gotten so
Yeah.
much smarter because of who I've gotten to meet and learn from.
Yeah.
And that feels like a true gift, a
Yeah.
true gift. Ah, man, it's time for our last question, and I feel not ready for it. But the good news is there's going to be many other places and spaces that we can have these types of conversations, Dr. King, that our folks can listen to. So I don't feel too sad because more to come. But for now, I'm going to ask you the final question, which is what advice would you give a teacher starting their career today?
Be fearless. You know, there's so many things to be nervous about. I remember when I was first training teachers, we did an implementation of 7,000 tablets in the district many, many years ago. I don't want to date myself too much, but a long time ago. And there were so many teachers that were afraid that the devices would get broken or stolen, or, there were all these apprehensions, and they, sometimes those devices would sit in a classroom, and we would have to go one by one and go talk to the teachers and say, like, why don't you hand them out? Like, why can't the kiddos have them? And I remember one day specifically having a conversation with a superintendent in a school district, and them saying, "Well, I don't want to send devices home with kids. This is pre-pandemic, far before that time frame." And they said, "Well, I don't know. The devices could get stolen or anything could happen." And I said, "Well, what it, is my biggest concern is the child. If the child is not safe enough to be able to get from their school bus stop to their home without a device being stolen, then we have a bigger issue to address." And I think that's why it takes a community, right? When I think about a brand new teacher, I think it's so important to create a community around them, to create support structures around them so that they know that we are collectively addressing the needs of their kids from the minute they leave their house in the morning, before they even get on a bus, right? Because we're addressing the needs at the bus stop, we're addressing the needs on the bus, we're addressing the needs when they get to school and they're hungry and their stomach's growling. We're addressing the needs before, by the time they get to class, even during the day, right? If they need glasses or shoes or their uniform is torn or something else that they need, we're making sure they have a sustaining lunch that sustains their learning, right? And then they go home. There are some schools that are providing meals after school, right? It is the community and the continuum of student support that allows teachers to show up at their greatest capacity and potential. And what I would tell a new teacher is to learn about that community, push into that community, be a part of driving that community in your school district. Don't be afraid of it, right? If there's a panel, if there's a conversation, if there's a board meeting you can attend, if there are parent councils that you can be a part of those conversations. And knowing that that community is there is what will help you to overcome the fears of doing what is absolutely best and what will be monumental for the students you're hoping to serve.
Brilliant. Dr. King, you are such a light and such a powerful voice across so many parts of the conversation happening in education today. Thank you so much for spending your time with me and with our audience.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Haley, and I appreciate the work you're doing in the space to amplify voices.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who tuned in today. Thanks for listening to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and share this episode. Be the first to know when we have a new episode by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or have a suggestion for an episode, email us at podcast@fullmindlearning.com.